Ravens got all mad because the Titans were dancing on the logo before the game. Would I have done that? Maybe not. But if you're really that mad, what you would do is you would come out in the game, you would run for 100 on the ground if you're Lamar Jackson, 3 rushing touchdowns, and you would beat the life out of the Titans 41-17. That's what you would do. That didn't happen. The Titans, once again, gave another great showcase, as they seem to do nowadays against the Ravens. Since last year's upset and the divisional round of the playoffs, the Titans have had the Ravens' number, and they are 2-0 against them in only 2 meetings, obviously. The NFC East almost went winless yesterday. I mean, again, the Giants were off, but still. The Giants have been, in all honesty, the best performing team in that division. Never thought I'd say that. The Colts come back. Who's going to win the NFC South? All these Colts fans and all these fan pages are talking all this crap. Let the game be played. Let the game be played. NFL Week 11 review. Let's talk about everything in this lopsided week. I really don't. I'm sitting here looking at all these games. There must have been 3 or 4 games that I blatantly 155% got wrong yesterday. You know, it's crazy because a lot of times football is unpredictable. Sports in general are unpredictable. But there was something about yesterday that if you put money or you did betting lines, you probably failed miserably. And if you took the underdogs, you may have had a cash-filled Monday. And I said yesterday, today's actually Tuesday, by the way. We go over the NFL Week 11, the final week before Thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving games, 2/3 of them are absolutely terrible on paper. Granted, we may get a good game between Houston and Detroit. Wouldn't count on it. We might get a good game between Washington and Dallas. We can only hope. And then, of course, the nightcap games, Pittsburgh and Baltimore, always play each other well. Despite Pittsburgh being the much better team, they always play each other well. And all we can hope for is a good game on that. But Pittsburgh is rolling, man, and they are dangerous. Let's talk about NFL Week 11, Seattle and Arizona, Thursday Night Football. Now, before we go into this game, one of the things I want to talk about is that Seattle did play Arizona earlier in the year. Arizona did get the win. Arizona looks great. The NFC West is the best division in football. If San Francisco played like they did last year, this would be an unstoppable division. The Rams are playing much better. Their offense is hit or miss. Their defense has been great. Let's see. Cardinals are self-explanatory. They've made a huge transition from last year to this year. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins has been beautiful for the Arizona Cardinals. Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson's been a monster. Granted, the Seahawks have kind of taken a step back the last couple of weeks in their games. But despite that, Seattle is still a favorite to a lot to win the division, and I would still put them as my favorite. And then San Francisco, half their team is on injury reserve, and they're just kind of Super Bowl hangover. You know how it goes. Seattle and Arizona. Kyler Murray, 269 yards, 2 touchdowns. Larry Fitzgerald, still playing football. Unbelievable. 8 receptions, 62 yards. Wilson, 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. Hyde ran the ball. Obviously, Chris Carson has been on the injury reserve, 79 yards and a touchdown. And Tyler Lockett, 9 receptions, 67 yards and a touchdown. Seattle, 28-21 beats Arizona. That is their final meeting. I believe Seattle has to play the Rams still, and they may have to play San Francisco again. San Francisco has been the bottom dweller of the division. Usually in every division, a very good division, you have that one team at the bottom of the division that just doesn't really add much substance. And in this case, this year, it's the 49ers, based on the primary fact that their team is hurt. Garoppolo's hurt, out for mostly the year. Kittle, one of the best tight ends in the league, hurt. Sherman, I don't know where he's been. I don't follow San Francisco. I feel like they're one of the least talked about teams this year in football. But Seattle does get that win. And I believe they're tied with the Rams, if I'm correct. I don't know if they play the Rams again. Again, I got to follow the NFC West a little bit closer. Let's talk about a rivalry. At least, well, it has to be a rivalry after yesterday. The Titans and the Ravens. I had myself a good Sunday. The Titans got back on track against the Ravens. The Titans' defense has been pretty disastrous all year. I would say, in all honesty, it wasn't an awful showing of their defense. They have to get better at third down. Third down defense is terrible. Third down defense is so important in football, and it's one of the things that the Titans have failed at miserably this year. The Titans went into Baltimore. Obviously, the last time these two teams met was in the divisional game, or the divisional round of the playoffs last year, where the Titans, on paper, had no business going into that game. The Ravens were the best team in the league without question last year. 14-2, unstoppable offense, fairly good defense. And the Titans squeezed in the very last week of the season via wild card. They went to, who did they play first? Brain fart. you're the Titans fan and you forgot who your team played in the first round of the playoffs. New England. They played New England. Got the win over New England. New England was on the downfall anyway. Granted, based on the fact that Tom Brady was aging, New England didn't have the receivers. They weren't scoring the football like they did 3-4 years prior, and that's what caused that. Then they went into Baltimore, and they dominated the Ravens. The result that happened was the complete opposite of what should have happened. They met the Ravens again on Sunday. Tannehill, 259 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Henry has some of his best games against the Ravens, and he did it again, 133 yards and a touchdown, and a good game for Corey Davis, 5 receptions, 113 yards. Lamar Jackson, who's been very inconsistent this year. I still route the Ravens as a good team, but they obviously don't have the special fireworks that they had, at least for their team last year. Lamar had 186 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The pick, now I can't believe the Titans defense got an interception, excuse me. J.K. Dobbins ran the ball with Ingram out, 70 yards and a touchdown, and Mark Andrews at tight end, 5 receptions, 96 yards, and a touchdown. 30-24, so basically what happened was the Titans had the lead. The Ravens tied it at the end of the fourth quarter. The Titans got the ball in overtime. No, they did not. Baltimore got the ball 3 and out. Titans got it, went down the field very quickly. A nice 20-yard run from Derrick Henry for a touchdown. 30-24, the Titans beat the Ravens. They are tied with the Colts for the division lead. Monstrous game this Sunday for the second meeting with the Colts. The Colts thrashed us 2 weeks ago in Tennessee. We go to Indianapolis to play them, and it is a crucial game for the Titans to win. The Titans have dominated the AFC South, except for the Colts. The Colts have always played the Titans well. The Colts have usually had the Titans' number in recent years. Obviously, the Titans have become a much better team in the last 2 years than they have prior to that. But the Titans, the importance of them winning this game is very important because this division will most likely come down to the wire. Houston is irrelevant. Jacksonville's irrelevant. It's the Titans and Colts, 2 dogs fighting for the AFC South. And we're going to see what happens. Baltimore will go to, I want to say they travel to Pittsburgh. I know they play Thanksgiving night, but I want to say they travel to Pittsburgh. Speaking of teams that lost and have done that quite a lot this year, we're talking about the Chargers coming to New York to play the Jets. The Chargers offense, despite their 2-7 record, has indicated to be much better than what you think. And their offense had a field day on the Jets, just like I said they would. The Jets, on the other hand, looked miserable in the first half. They almost came back and won this game. So one thing you got to say about the Jets, and I know that there's not too much positivity that you could really spread when it comes to talking about the Jets. One thing that you got to say about the Jets is the fact that the last 2 games, they played them much better than they have earlier. Joe Flacco, 205 yards, 2 TDs, and a pick. Frank Gore, one of the best rushers of all time, 61 yards and a touchdown. Then we get to the Chargers stat sheet. Justin Herbert, Rookie of the Year award. I think that's going to be unanimous right now because I don't see any rookie that's balling better than Justin Herbert. 366 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Keenan Allen went all over that miserable Jets secondary. 16 receptions, 145 yards, and a touchdown. 34-28, the Chargers beat the Jets. The Jets remain winless. They will go next week against Miami, who had a stunning loss to the Denver Broncos, which we'll talk about in a minute or so. Man, Adam Gase will make it to the end of the year. If they go 0-16, I believe he will be fired the day after the final game of the season. If the Jets haven't fired Adam Gase yet, they're not planning on doing it, at least not this season. Because if your team is 0-10 and your coach is still employed, when you know he's not a good coach, you have plans for that coach to remain the rest of the season. It would make no sense for the Jets to have some assistant for 3-4 games going into the end of the season. They're already 0-10. They're going nowhere. And believe it or not, until yesterday, they mathematically were still in the playoffs. Can't believe that. I wonder what would have to happen for an 0-10 team. Let's say the Jets were to win 6 straight games, 6-10. AFC South would have to tank. AFC East, Miami would have to tank. Technically, the Jets could make the playoffs, but that would never happen. NFC East action. Worst part of most people's Sunday. The Browns in Philadelphia. Baker Mayfield's not good. And it's going to be a while before I ever tell you that he's good, despite the fact that Cleveland is 7-3 and they're in contention for a wild card spot in the AFC. Carson Wentz, 235 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Again, Carson Wentz is starting to become known as the turnover machine. Baker Mayfield, 204 yards, nothing else. Nick Chubb running the ball well, 114 yards. Cleveland beats Philadelphia 22-17. The Philadelphia Eagles fans are calling for Doug Peterson's head. I do believe that the Eagles need to move on and they need to rearrange their coaching staff. Again, it's not all Carson Wentz's fault, but this Eagles team desperately needs some type of new life in Philadelphia. Carson Wentz has not been a solution either, so I don't want to jump on that wagon of everybody thinking that, some people give Carson Wentz too much credit and some people don't give him enough credit. And that's where the problem is when it comes to a quarterback like that. The New Orleans experiment took place in Atlanta, and it wasn't Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, by a dual threat mercenary player, did not start over him. Taysom Hill started for the Saints, and is he ever going to be a long-term answer at quarterback? Never. Could he play a game or so? Yeah. I don't think Taysom Hill, unless they keep winning, will play every single game for the Saints. While Drew Brees is on injury reserve, I think that Jameis Winston is going to get the spotlight at some point. But I got to say, Taysom Hill made some moves yesterday. Let's talk about the Atlanta stat sheet first. Matt Ryan, 232 yards and 2 picks. Calvin Ridley, 5 receptions, 90 yards. I don't have a Julio Jones stat. I actually don't know if he played. I heard somebody said that he was hurt. Taysom Hill had 233 yards in the air, and we know how he is when he runs. He rushed for 51 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And New Orleans got the win 24-9. They remain in control of the NFC South. Now, again, Tampa Bay is there, but I do think New Orleans is the better team, and I do think that New Orleans will win the division. Even though Tampa Bay has had its moments this year, so many teams have so much talent, and it's hard to bet on them because each week they're inconsistent. And that's where we get the problems that we have here. And Michael Thomas as well, 9 receptions, 104 yards. It's nice to see a big game from him. Breakout receiver, had some injuries, didn't play a couple of games this year. And that is that. A game that I never saw coming. Washington and Cincinnati. Joe Burrow left the game with a knee injury. And all of a sudden it was a torn ACL, and he's out for the year and maybe even next year. Now, I was listening to NFL Live yesterday, and they were saying that they think that Joe Burrow should not be playing next year. Joe Burrow looks like, you could tell by looking at how he plays, that he looks like he's a franchise answer at quarterback for Cincinnati. The team builds their defense, build more around him. Cincinnati could be good in a couple of years. They've shown some upside, but it wasn't in this game. Burrow, 203 yards and a touchdown. Boyd caught well for Cincinnati, 9 receptions, 85 yards. The Alex Smith project gave Washington a win, 166 yards, a TD, and a pick. Gibson has run the ball well. He now looks like he's Washington's answer at running back. 94 yards and a touchdown. And McLaurin, again, one of the more underrated receivers in the league. 5 receptions, 84 yards. Washington beat Cincinnati 20-9. It means nothing. I want to see, Washington and Dallas are both so bad. But the matchup, if you really look at it, is interesting because Washington, we don't know what comes out of Alex Smith. Dallas just came off of their first good game in a while. And they actually match up better than people think. But the game on paper sucks. But we'll talk about that. Blowout, shutout. Carolina and Detroit. I actually picked Detroit in this game. And boy, was I wrong. Stafford, 178 yards. P.J. Walker was starting for the Panthers. Now, I don't know if that was an experiment or Bridgewater was hurt. Again, some of this stuff I need to research before the video. But Walker had 258 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Davis ran well, 64 yards and a touchdown. And DJ Moore, another underrated receiver, 7 receptions, 127 yards. Carolina shuts out Detroit 20-0. Carolina, again, up 1 week, down another. Detroit, the same thing. You could see Detroit is starting, well, not in this game, but in general, Detroit is starting to make some moves. They're slowly starting to head to the better direction. Carolina wants the same thing, but I always will think of Carolina as an 8-8 football team. I don't think they're the worst team in the league, but I've always thought of them as mediocre. And it's going to probably remain that way for a while. Speaking of teams that are not really mediocre, Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. This was actually a close game, and I think Pittsburgh ripped the door off in the second half. We're going to talk about some of these stats here. Big Ben, 267 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Connor, 89 yards on the ground, and Johnson, 12 receptions, 111 yards. Somebody is going to need an answer at Jacksonville at quarterback, because I don't think Minshew's the answer, and Jake Clutton certainly is not. 151 yards, 4 interceptions. Robinson ran for 73 yards. Pittsburgh dominates Jacksonville 27-3. They will now go to Baltimore. Remaining, they are undefeated, 10-0. Does Pittsburgh finish undefeated? No. Well, maybe. I would think that it would be in their best interest to lose a game, because going into the playoffs undefeated, I feel like, again, and a lot of people say there's just more pressure with that. Jacksonville sucks. Not good. They need Minshew back, honestly. You don't realize how valuable someone like that was until you don't have him. Another game that, it's New England, man. It's just they keep taking steps forward and then they keep taking steps backwards. Houston and New England. Cam, 365 yards in the TD. Harris, 43 yards and a touchdown. Bird, 6 receptions, 132 yards and a touchdown. I have no idea what that is. Watson, 344 yards, 2 touchdowns. He ran for 36 yards and a touchdown on the ground. And Brandon Cooks, 4 receptions, 85 yards. Houston beats New England 27-20. New England looked so great at the beginning of the year. And then they completely fell off. Then they won. They fell off. They beat Baltimore. They lost. Again, another one of those teams. New England's not a good team. They probably won't make the playoffs. I don't have enough faith in New England. Even with the expanded wild card, I don't see them making the playoffs because, again, look at what we're getting. They can't beat Houston. They beat Baltimore, but they can't beat Houston. Denver and Miami, an upset. They said that they took 2 out of this game. I thought it was injury related, but they actually took him out of this game because they wanted to put Fitzpatrick in, who had 117 yards in a pick, so there's your experiment. Devontae Parker, 6 receptions, 61 yards, and a touchdown. We get to the Denver side of things. Drew Lock, 270 yards and an interception. Melvin Gordon, good game, 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Patrick from Denver, 5 receptions, 119 yards. 20-13, Denver upsets Miami. Miami's going to have bumps in the roads. They'll find their way into the playoffs. They won't win the division, but they're going to find their way into the playoffs one way or another. The comeback, the back and forth. Now we get to these framing of games. The actual late games of the week were actually very good. The Colts and the Packers. Rodgers, 311 yards, 3 touchdowns a pick. Jones, 41 yards and a touchdown. Adams, 7 receptions, 106 yards and a touchdown. Rivers, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Taylor, 90 yards on the ground. Michael Pittman Jr., 3 receptions, 66 yards and a touchdown. The Colts shocked the Packers, 34-31. This Colts team is very good. Should they celebrate a Super Bowl? No. They beat Green Bay. That's impressive. Should they celebrate a Super Bowl? No. They have to win the division first. But good win for them. Green Bay again. It's hard to make any type of predictions for any of these games. Dallas and Minnesota. We got 3 games left to go off. We're hitting 18 minutes here. Boom. Dallas looked good for their first game in a while. Andy Dalton was in. 203 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. He doesn't have to light the world on fire, but if Andy Dalton comes out and he looks like this, Cowboys will win some games. Elliott, 103 on the ground. Amari Cooper, 6 receptions, 81 yards. Cousins, 314 yards, 3 TDs. Cook, another good game on the ground, 115 yards and a touchdown. Adam Thielen, very good game. 8 receptions, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We talk about Dallas getting the win 31-28 over Minnesota. If Dallas can look like this on Thanksgiving, they will beat Washington. Washington has a good defense, but Washington's offense is not that great either. That's a really hard game to pick. But it doesn't mean anything. It means that Dallas played up to potential, and they played a better game than people would give them credit for. It means nothing going forward. Minnesota is Minnesota. Irrelevant. Sunday Night Football. There's been one team that's had the Chiefs number, at least for a while, and their one loss is to Vegas. It was almost their second loss to Vegas. Vegas plays Kansas City very well. Mahomes, 348 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Edwards, 69 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Travis Kelce, 8 receptions, 127 yards and a touchdown. Now, Kansas City has not been very run-heavy this year with the football because they don't need to be, because they're a pass offense. Derek Carr, 275 yards, 3 TDs and a pick. Jacobs, 55 yards and a touchdown on the ground. And Waller, 7 receptions, 88 yards and a touchdown. Vegas scored late in this game, and then a game-winning drive for Kansas City, 35-31. Kansas City was not going to be swept by Vegas. Kansas City continues to show you they're one of the best teams in the AFC. Monday Night Football, final game of the week. Tom Brady, we talk about how he struggles with good defenses. This was no different. Jared Goff had sort of a good game. 376 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Cooper Kupp, very good game, 11 receptions, 145 yards. Tom Brady, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And Antonio Brown, 8 receptions for 57 yards. 27-24, the Rams beat Tampa Bay. Tom Brady has become an interception machine, and he never was on New England. You could say what you want. Tampa Bay will find its way into the playoffs. Will they do anything? I don't know. Tom Brady has that playoff experience, but again, he's not on New England. NFL Week 11 review. Everybody stay safe.